The metallic taste of blood mixed with antiseptic as Victoria Hayes tried to remember her own name. 5 months pregnant, left eye swollen shut, 3 cracked ribs. Her husband's fists had finally gone too far. But Derek Callahan made one fatal mistake. He didn't know the waitress he'd been beating for 3 years was worth $3.2 billion. Victoria Hayes Worthington, missing billionaire heiress, had been hiding in plain sight. She'd disappeared 5 years ago, changed her name, became nobody, thought she could escape her legacy and find normal love. Instead, she found a monster who targeted her specifically, who tracked her down, who spent 3 years systematically destroying her while planning to steal her fortune. But here's what Derek didn't understand. You can't kill what refuses to die. And when Victoria finally fought back, she had resources he never imagined. Lawyers, security, evidence of 6 other victims, and a mother who would burn the world down to protect her daughter. This is the story of how a woman worth billions became worth nothing in her own eyes, and then reclaimed everything. How the abuser became the victim. How justice for once actually worked. And how one woman's survival became a movement that saved thousands. Stay with me for the next 2 hours. Because this story, it's going to shock you. It's going to make you angry. It's going to break your heart. And it might just save someone's life. This is Abusive Husband Beats Pregnant Wife Badly. Turns out she's a billionaire heiress. Revenge shocks. Let's begin. The metallic taste of blood mixed with the hospital's antiseptic smell as Victoria Hayes tried to remember her own name. Everything hurt. Her left eye wouldn't open. Each breath sent sharp daggers through her ribs. But none of that mattered as much as the sound filling the emergency room. Thump, 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 thump. Her baby's heartbeat on the monitor. 5 months pregnant, and she could barely remember how she got here. The details swam in and out of focus like debris in muddy water. Derek's fists, the kitchen floor, his voice saying something about the baby being his meal ticket. Then nothing, just black. Mrs. Callahan, I need you to tell me what happened. The voice belonged to a woman in a white coat. Dr. Mitchell, according to her name badge. Kind eyes that had probably seen too many women like Victoria come through these doors. I fell. The lie came automatically. Well practiced over 3 years of marriage. Down the stairs. I'm so clumsy lately with all this pregnancy weight. Myra Mitchell's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Disbelief, or maybe pity. Victoria couldn't tell which was worse. The stairs, Dr. Mitchell repeated slowly, and these bruises on your arms that look exactly like finger marks. Victoria looked away, focused on the monitor. Thump, 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 thump. Her baby was alive. That was what mattered. That was all that mattered. A hand squeezed hers 3 times. Quick pulses of pressure in a familiar pattern. Victoria's working eyes struggled to focus on the nurse standing beside her bed. Dark hair pulled back. Lillian Rodriguez, the name tag read. Lillian, her roommate from college. Her best friend from another lifetime. Recognition must have shown on Victoria's face because Lillian squeezed again. 3 times. Their old signal from freshman year. I know. I see you. I'm here. I'm going to examine you now, Dr. Mitchell said. The nurse will stay with you. You're safe here. Safe. What a strange word. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd felt safe. Definitely not in the last 3 years. Maybe not in the last 6 years, since her father died and her whole world imploded. Through the thin curtains separating her from the waiting room, she could hear Derek's voice. Smooth, concerned. Playing the word husband for anyone listening. Yeah, Dad, she's fine. You know how dramatic she gets. Always needs attention. His father's laugh crackled through the phone speaker. The Callahan men, always finding humor in women's pain, always protecting each other. Victoria's hand moved to her belly, the slight swell where her daughter was growing. At least Dr. Mitchell said it was a girl. Victoria hadn't told Derek yet, hadn't told anyone except Lillian during that one secret phone call last week when she'd finally admitted things were bad, really bad. How far along? Dr. Mitchell asked, pressing gently on Victoria's abdomen. 21 weeks, almost 22. And this happened tonight? Yes. What time? Victoria's mind struggled to grasp the timeline. Everything before the hospital was fragmented. Derek coming home angry about something. Money, maybe, or that text message he saw on her phone from Lillian. He'd been drinking. That much she remembered. The smell of whiskey on his breath as he grabbed her shoulders and shook her. I don't know. 8? 9? It was 2:47 in the morning now, according to the clock on the wall. Hours lost to unconsciousness and ambulance rides and emergency room check-ins. Mrs. Callahan, I'm going to be honest with you. Dr. Mitchell moved closer, lowering her voice. The injuries you have are not consistent with a fall downstairs. The bruising pattern on your neck indicates manual strangulation. Your ribs are cracked, not broken, which suggests repeated blunt force trauma to your torso, and these defensive wounds on your forearms tell me you tried to protect yourself. Victoria said nothing. What was there to say? Yes, my husband tried to kill me tonight. Yes, he's been hitting me for 3 years and I stayed because leaving felt more impossible than dying. Blink twice if you're in danger, Dr. Mitchell whispered. Once if you're safe. Victoria blinked. Once, twice, once, twice. She couldn't stop blinking. Near harm. Dr. Mitchell straightened and pulled out her phone. She moved toward the curtain, speaking quietly to someone Victoria couldn't see. Lillian's hand never left hers, still squeezing that pattern 3 times, over and over. I know. I see you. I'm here. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time had lost meaning somewhere between the kitchen floor and the hospital gurney. Then the curtain opened and a woman in a dark blazer stepped through. Detective Rachel Brennan, her badge identified her. Domestic Violence Unit. Mrs. Callahan, I'm here because Dr. Mitchell filed a mandatory report. I need to ask you some questions and take some photographs. Is that okay? No, Victoria wanted to say. Nothing about this is okay. Send everyone away. Let me disappear. Let me go back to being nobody. But she nodded instead because her baby was still alive, and that meant she had to be alive too. The detective took photos. So many photos. Each flash of the camera felt like an accusation. Evidence of her failure. Proof that she'd let things go too far. I need to ask you directly, Detective Brennan said gently. Did your husband do this to you? The words stuck in Victoria's throat. Saying yes meant everything would change. Saying yes meant admitting defeat. Saying yes meant going back to being Victoria Hayes, and she wasn't ready. She'd never be ready. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. Derek did this. From the waiting room, Derek's voice rose. You can't keep me from my wife. I have rights. But he didn't. Not anymore. Alone for the first time in 72 hours, Victoria let her mind wander to places she'd kept locked away for years. To memories of a different life, a different version of herself. 6 years ago, her father, Thomas Hayes, had stood in his study trying to explain something about trust funds and legal protections and preparing for the future. Victoria had been 23 and angry, and so tired of being the Hayes Industries heiress. So tired of every decision being scrutinized, every relationship being questioned. The trust activates when you turn 29, he'd explained, or in case of a documented life-threatening situation, whichever comes first. She'd signed the papers without reading them, had signed a prenuptial agreement without understanding it, had done everything he asked while resenting every moment of it. 2 months later, he'd died. A heart attack at 58, too young, too sudden, and Victoria had crumbled under the weight of grief and expectation and hundreds of people looking to her for leadership she couldn't provide. So she'd run, changed her name legally to Victoria Martin, shrubbed her digital footprint, moved 3 states away and taken a job at Lucky's Diner, making $9 an hour plus tips. For 2 years, she'd been invisible, free, nobody. Then Derek walked in looking for coffee and a smile. She'd thought he was her reward for surviving, her prize for choosing a different life. Instead, he'd been her punishment. Victoria touched her belly again, felt the flutter of movement beneath her fingers. Her 29th birthday was in 4 weeks. The trust would activate automatically. But this, tonight, qualified as life-threatening according to her father's carefully worded legal documents, which meant Victoria Hayes, heir to $3.2 billion, was about to come back from the dead. And Derek Callahan, the man who'd spent 3 years beating his wife while embezzling from clients and hiding a mistress, had no idea what was coming. Lillian, Victoria whispered through her split lip. I need you to call someone. Her friend leaned closer. The number's in my old phone, the one I hid in your apartment junior year, in the box labeled time capsule. Lillian's eyes widened. She'd almost forgotten about that box, about the emergency contact Victoria had insisted on leaving behind. Tell Benjamin Ashford that Victoria Hayes needs him. Victoria's voice grew stronger. Tell him that's time. Lillian Rodriguez hadn't been home in 36 hours. Her shift should have ended at midnight, but when she'd seen the ambulance bring in a Jane Doe with strangulation marks and pregnancy complications, she'd volunteered to stay. Something about the woman's face had looked familiar even through the swelling. Then the Jane Doe had opened her working eye, and Lillian had recognized her college roommate. Tori Martin, the quiet waitress who'd shown up at their dorm room 15 years ago with 2 suitcases and a desperate need to disappear. They'd been randomly assigned as roommates and had somehow become best friends despite Tori's obvious secrets. Or maybe because of them. Now racing home at 3:47 in the morning. Lillian finally understood why Tori had made her keep that sealed box. Why she'd said, if I ever go missing, this explains everything. If something happens to me, call the number in this phone. At the time, it had seemed dramatic, romantic even, like something out of a movie. Now it felt like a survival plan. The box was exactly where Tori said it would be. Top shelf of the hall closet, buried under winter coats and forgotten scarves. Shoebox, no label. Inside, an old iPhone still in its original packaging from 8 years ago. A handwritten note, and a photograph of a young woman who looked like Tori standing beside an older man at some fancy event. Lillian powered on the phone, 1 contact saved, Benjamin, 1 text message draft, never sent. I need to come home. She made the call, 3 rings, then a man's voice alert despite the early hour. Victoria? No, this is Lillian Rodriguez, Victoria's friend. She asked me to call this number. A pause. Is she alive? The question sent chills down Lillian's spine. Not where is she, not what happened, just the stark, terrifying question that mattered most. Barely, Lillian answered honestly. Where? St. Catherine's Hospital. Emergency room. Her husband, she couldn't finish the sentence. I'll be there in 4 hours. Don't let her out of your sight. And Lillian? His voice softened slightly. Thank you for keeping that phone. You knew I had it? Victoria Hayes doesn't do anything without a backup plan, even when she's pretending not to be Victoria Hayes. The call ended. Lillian stared at the phone in her hand, her mind reeling. Victoria Hayes, not Tori Martin, not even Tori Callahan, the struggling waitress married to a financial advisor. Victoria Hayes, the billionaire heiress who disappeared 6 years ago after her father's sudden death. Her roommate was one of the richest women in America, and she'd been living in a 1-bedroom apartment, working double shifts at a diner, getting beaten by a man who thought she was nobody. Lillian grabbed the box and drove back to the hospital. Victoria was awake when she returned, staring at the ceiling with her working eye while machine beeped their steady rhythm around her. He's in custody, Lillian said quietly. Detective Brennan arrested him. They're holding him for assault, attempted murder, and something about embezzlement. Good. Victoria's voice was flat, empty. Tori, that's not my name. She turned her head slightly. I mean, it is. Legally, I changed it to Victoria Martin. But I was born Victoria Margaret Hayes, daughter of Thomas Hayes, heir to Hayes Industries, worth $3.2 billion. And I've been washing dishes for minimum wage while my husband beat me. The words hung between them. Oui, Lillian finally asked. Victoria's working eye filled with tears. Because I was drowning. After Dad died, everyone wanted something from me. The board wanted decisions I wasn't qualified to make. The media wanted sound bites I didn't have. His friends wanted me to be him, and I couldn't. I just couldn't. She took a shuddering breath, wincing at the pain in her ribs. So I disappeared. Thought if I could just be normal for a while, I'd figure out who I was without the money and the name and the expectations. Thought I'd find myself. A bitter laugh. Instead, I found Derek. Did he know who you were? I don't think so. I scrubbed everything, changed my name legally, cut all ties, As far as he knew, I was exactly what I appeared to be. A nobody waitress with no family and no money. Lillian sat on the edge of the hospital bed. So what happens now? Now I become Victoria Hayes again. My father set up the trust to activate on my 29th birthday or in case of life-threatening emergency. This qualifies. She touched her bruised throat. And Derek is about to learn that he's been hitting a woman who could buy his entire existence with pocket change. What about the baby? Victoria's hand moved to her belly. Her name is going to be Catherine. After a woman Derek killed 4 years ago, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he is, what he's done, and then I'm going to make sure he spends the rest of his life in prison. How do you know about Catherine? I don't, not yet. But if there's one thing I learned from my father, it's that men like Derek don't start with the attempted murder. They work up to it. Victoria's voice hardened. When Benjamin gets here, we're going to find out exactly how many women came before me. Before Lillian could respond, Victoria's expression changed, softened, broke. I check my phone. Not my phone, the phone Derek lets me have. She closed her working eye. 3 times. That's how many times I unlocked it and checked his location in the hour before he came home. Lock. Check where he is, unlock. Read his text. Lock. Pretend I don't know he's lying. Lillian squeezed her hand 3 times. Their signal. I knew, Victoria continued. I've known for months he was cheating. Knew he was stealing money from the joint account I didn't even want. Knew he was lying about working late. But knowing and admitting are different things. You were surviving, Lillian said firmly. That's not weakness. That's survival. Is it? Victoria opened her eye again. Or was I just too proud to admit my father was right? That I couldn't make it on my own? That the first man who showed me attention when I was nobody was a predator who saw an easy target? The question hung unanswered. There's something else, Victoria said after a long moment. Something I need to tell you before Benjamin gets here. Okay. The first time Derek raised his voice at me, I did the panic cleaning. Do you remember? You came over and I was scrubbing the kitchen at 2 in the morning. You asked if I was okay and I said I couldn't sleep. Lillian remembered it had been strange, out of character. I was terrified, Victoria admitted. He'd yelled at me for forgetting to buy his favorite beer. Just yelled. Didn't even hit me yet. But I knew. Somewhere deep down, I knew that was just the beginning. So I cleaned, reorganized every cabinet, made everything perfect. Like if I could just be perfect enough, he'd stay calm. That's not how abuse works, Lillian said gently. I know that now, but then I thought I could fix it. Fix him. Fix us. Victoria's laugh was hollow. The first slap came 8 months into our marriage. I'd laughed too loud at another man's joke at some party. Derek apologized after, cried, swore it would never happen again. And I believed him because I wanted to. When did it get worse? Gradually, like a frog in boiling water. Each incident was just a little worse than the last. By the time I realized I was in danger, I was already trapped. He controlled the money, knew my schedule, had isolated me from everyone except you. And even then, I couldn't tell you the truth because saying it out loud meant admitting I'd failed. Lillian felt tears on her own cheeks. You didn't fail, he did. He's the failure. Maybe, but I stayed. That's on me. You survived. That's also on you. And now you're going to fight back. That's on you too. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that broke Lillian's heart. I'm not crazy, right? He really did try to kill me? You're not crazy, Lillian said firmly. You know what you experienced. You know what's real. It's just that he's so good at making me doubt myself. Saying things didn't happen when I know they did. Telling me I'm overreacting when I'm just reacting to actual danger. Making me feel like I'm the problem. That's called gaslighting. And it's abuse. What he did to you is abuse, all of it. Not just tonight. Victoria nodded slowly. I need to remember that. When he gets out, and he will get out, at least temporarily, I need to remember that I'm not crazy, that this happened, that it's real. He's not getting anywhere near you, Lillian promised. But they both knew restraining orders were just paper. and paper didn't stop fists. At 6:30 in the morning, Benjamin Ashford walked into Victoria's hospital room looking like he'd driven straight through from wherever he'd been. Dark suit, slightly wrinkled, tie loosened, but his eyes were sharp and focused entirely on the woman in the hospital bed. Victoria. He said her name like a prayer. "Oh, sweetheart." "Hi, Benjamin." He moved closer, taking in the damage with a practiced eye. "Tell me everything." So she did. All of it, from the moment she'd met Derek to the moment she'd woken up in the hospital. Benjamin listened without interrupting, his expression growing colder with each detail. When she finished, he pulled out a tablet and began typing rapidly. The trust activates immediately given the documented life-threatening circumstances. As of 6 o'clock this morning, you have full access to your inheritance. All $3.2 billion of it. The number still sounded fake. Too large to be real. "There's more," Benjamin continued. "Your father's will included a clause that I helped him draft. Any spouse who demonstrates financial exploitation, physical harm, or intent to control the beneficiary is automatically excluded from any claims. Not only can Derek not access your money, but under the prenuptial agreement you signed—" "I didn't sign a prenup." Benjamin's smile was grim. "You didn't as Tory Martin, but Victoria Hayes signed a blanket prenuptial agreement when you were 23. Your father insisted. Do you remember?" Slowly, Victoria nodded. She did remember. One of their last fights before he died. He'd been adamant about protecting her future. She'd called him paranoid and controlling. That prenup applies to any marriage entered into by Victoria Hayes or any legal name derivative, which means Derek Callahan signed away any claim to your assets the moment you married him, whether he knew it or not. "He didn't know," Victoria said. "I changed my name before I met him. He thinks he married a waitress." "Well, he's about to learn differently." Benjamin's expression was fierce. "And I'm going to make sure that lesson destroys him." Detective Rachel Brennan returned to Victoria's hospital room at 9 in the morning with a folder full of documents and an expression that promised bad news. "Mrs. Callahan, or should I say Mrs. Hayes, I need to show you something." She spread photographs across the hospital tray table. A luxury apartment building. A woman's face, young, pretty, carefully filtered on social media. Screenshots of Instagram posts showing a man's hand on a flat stomach. Captions about manifesting family and finding true love. "Her name is Amber Sinclair," Detective Brennan explained. 26 years old, real estate agent. She's been posting about her boyfriend Derek for the past 8 months. Never shows his face fully, always carefully cropped. But we matched the watch, the car, several identifying features. Victoria stared at the photos. The woman looked happy, in love, completely unaware that her boyfriend was married. "She thinks she's pregnant." Victoria's voice was hollow. "Based on the posts, yes. She's been manifesting getting pregnant, posting about trying to conceive, very publicly planning a future with a man who already has a pregnant wife at home." "Does she know about me?" "We don't think so. When we approached her this morning, she was shocked. Showed us forged divorce papers Derek gave her, fake court dates, an entire fabricated story about his marriage ending 2 years ago." Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. Not heartbreak. That would imply Derek had ever held her heart. This was something different. The death of whatever delusion she'd been clinging to about their marriage being real. "There's more," Detective Brennan continued. "The financial advisor job Derek claimed to have? It doesn't exist. He was fired 8 months ago for embezzling client funds. There's a warrant out for his arrest. He's been living off the apartment you didn't know about, paid for by money stolen from elderly clients and whatever he took from your joint account." "How much?" "From the clients? $890,000. From your account? Approximately $32,000 over the past year." $32,000. Victoria almost laughed. She'd been carefully saving that money from her waitress tips, thinking she needed a safety net in case things got worse. Derek had been systematically stealing it while planning his next con. "Is the mistress pressing charges?" "We're not sure yet. She's in shock. Claims she gave him $60,000 for a down payment on a house they were supposedly buying together. That money's gone, gambled away based on preliminary investigation." Victoria's mind spun through the timeline. 8 months ago, Derek lost his job, started stealing from clients, moved a mistress into a secret apartment, all while coming home to his pregnant wife and complaining about her spending too much on groceries. "What happens now?" she asked. "He's being arraigned at 2 this afternoon. Bail will probably be set high given the severity of charges, but there's a chance he'll make it." "His father will pay," Victoria said with certainty. "James Callahan would mortgage his house before him, or if we admitting his son as a criminal." Benjamin cleared his throat. "Then we make sure he can't get anywhere near you. Restraining order. Asset freeze. Every legal protection available." "I want more than protection," Victoria said quietly. "I want justice." She looked at Lillian, at Benjamin, at Detective Brennan. Three people who knew the truth. Three people who could help her become Victoria Hayes again and use that power to ensure Derek Callahan never hurt anyone else. "I want his life destroyed the way he tried to destroy mine." Victoria stood in front of the hospital bathroom mirror, really looking at herself for the first time since the attack. The woman staring back was unrecognizable. Not just because of the bruises, though those were horrific enough. It was the fear in her eyes. The way she held herself small, contracted, like she was trying to take up less space in the world. When had she become this person? Lillian helped her to the bathroom floor when her legs gave out. They sat there together, backs against the cold tile, while Victoria cried. Not pretty tears. The ugly, gut-wrenching kind that came from somewhere primal. 3 years of swallowed screams finally escaping. "I sat in my car yesterday," Victoria said between sobs. 45 minutes, just sat there in the driveway, engine off, staring at the front door like it was going to swallow me whole. "Why didn't you leave?" "Because where would I go? Back to being Victoria Hayes? Admit my father was right? Admit I couldn't make it on my own?" She wiped her nose on her hospital gown. "I thought staying was brave. Thought fighting for my marriage was the right thing to do. But really, I was just too scared to face the truth." "What truth?" "That when you're more afraid of your own home than anywhere else in the world, you've already lost." Lillian pulled her closer, just held her while Victoria shook apart and slowly began to piece herself back together. After 20 minutes on the cold bathroom floor, Victoria heard a commotion outside. Raised voices. Someone demanding entry. "That's my daughter. You will let me see her right now, or I will buy this hospital and fire every single person who tried to stop me." Margaret Hayes Worthington had arrived. Victoria struggled to stand, Lillian supporting her weight. She looked at herself one more time in the mirror, saw the girl who'd run away 6 years ago, the woman who'd survived 3 years of abuse, and somewhere beneath the bruises, the ghost of Victoria Hayes waiting to resurface. "Let her in," Victoria said. The bathroom door opened. Margaret Hayes Worthington stood in the doorway, perfectly composed in a navy suit that probably cost more than Victoria's annual salary at the diner. But when she saw her daughter's face, the composition crumbled. "Baby girl," her voice broke. "I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner." "You weren't supposed to find me at all," Victoria said. "That was the point." "Well, the game's over now." Margaret's grief transformed instantly into something harder, colder. The expression of a woman who'd built an empire and crushed anyone who threatened it. "Benjamin's handling the legal side. I'm handling everything else. And that man," she spat the word like poison, "he's going to wish he'd never been born." Victoria almost felt sorry for Derek, almost. "Mom, wait. Before we do anything, I need to know. Has Derek tried to access my trust?" Margaret's smile was sharp enough to cut. 3 times, each time denied because he didn't have your authorization. The last attempt was yesterday afternoon. He tried to claim family and emergency access as your spouse. Our lawyers flagged it immediately. That's how Benjamin knew to expect your call. Victoria touched her bruised ribs, remembered Derek's final words before she'd lost consciousness. "You think you're special? You're nothing. You're nobody. And this baby is my meal ticket to something better." A meal ticket. That's all she'd ever been to him. That's all any woman had ever been to him. "Detective Brennan?" Victoria's voice was steely now, clear. "I'm ready to press charges, all of them. And I want a restraining order that includes a financial freeze on anything connected to my name." "That's my girl," Margaret whispered. Victoria spent the rest of the morning giving her statement. Every detail, every incident, every time Derek had hit her, belittled her, controlled her. Detective Brennan recorded everything with careful attention. "How long has the abuse been going on?" she asked. "3 years, since 8 months into our marriage." "And you never reported it before?" "No." "Why not?" Victoria considered the question. The real answer was complicated. Shame, fear, pride, the desperate hope that things would get better if she just tried harder. But she settled for the simple truth. "Because I thought I deserved it." Detective Brennan's pen stilled. "Why would you think that?" "Because I lied about who I was. Because I was hiding from my real life. Because some part of me believed this was my punishment for running away." Victoria's voice dropped. "And because Derek was very good at making me believe everything was my fault." "That's not true," Detective Brennan said gently. "Nothing you did, nothing justifies abuse. You understand that, right?" "I'm starting to." At 1:30, Benjamin returned with news. "Derek's arraignment is in 30 minutes. I strongly suggest you don't attend." "I'm going," Victoria said. "Tori." "Victoria," she corrected. "My name is Victoria Hayes, and I'm going to look Derek Callahan in the eye when he realizes who he's been beating." Lillian helped her dress in clothes Margaret had brought from the Hayes estate. A black dress that probably cost more than Derek's car. Shoes that cost more than 2 months of Victoria's waitress salary. Pearl earrings that were family heirlooms worth 6 figures. "How do I look?" Victoria asked. "Like revenge in Chanel," Lillian answered. The courthouse was packed. News of Derek's Hayes arrest had hit the morning headlines. Young financial advisor embezzles from elderly clients. It was a story that wrote itself. But they didn't know about the wife he'd been beating. The billionaire heiress he'd tried to murder. Not yet. When Derek was led into the courtroom in orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, his eyes immediately found Victoria. She watched him take in her appearance. The expensive dress, the designer shoes, the way she sat in the gallery like she owned the building. Confusion crossed his face, then rationalization. Maybe she'd borrowed the clothes, maybe they were fake. Then Benjamin stood. "Your Honor, Benjamin Ashford representing Victoria Hayes Worthington in related matters to this case. My client wishes to file formal charges of domestic violence, spousal abuse, and attempted murder in connection to the incident that occurred 2 nights ago." Derek's head snapped toward the lawyer. "Victoria Hayes Worthington? Who the hell is—" His eyes locked on Victoria, really looked at her for the first time in 3 years. And she watched, actually watched, the exact moment it clicked. The missing heiress he'd probably seen on news articles years ago. The few public photos from her father's funeral. The resemblance to the woman sitting in the gallery wearing more money than he'd ever stolen. "Gnomes," his voice cracked. "No, no, no, that's not. She's a waitress. She works at Lucky's Diner. She's nobody. She's worth $3.2 billion, Benjamin said clearly, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom. "And you've been physically abusing her for 3 years while embezzling money you thought she didn't have." My client kept detailed journals, photographs, and hospital records of every incident of abuse. We're pursuing the maximum sentence. Derek's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Disbelief, rage, fear, understanding. He'd been beating a billionaire. He'd tried to murder one of the richest women in America. And now she was going to use every resource at her disposal to destroy him. The judge was speaking. The prosecutor was adding charges. Derek's public defender was frantically whispering. But Derek just stared at Victoria with absolute devastation written across his features. "You lied to me," he finally said. Victoria stood, despite Lillian's warning hand on her arm, despite Benjamin's subtle headshake, despite every instinct screaming at her to stay silent. "I lied," her voice carried through the courtroom. "You want to talk about lying? You lied about your job, about your mistress, about the money you stole, about the baby you planned to use for child support, about loving me, about everything." She stepped closer to the railing separating the gallery from the defendant's area. "I did lie about who I was. I pretended to be poor when I'm rich. I hid my identity because I wanted to be normal. But you know what the difference is between us, Derek?" She locked eyes with him. "I did it to escape expectations. You did it to exploit people. I wanted to be invisible. You wanted to be important. And the cruelest irony, if you'd just been a decent human being, you could have had everything. But you had to be in control, had to make me small, had to break me down until I felt like nothing. She touched her stomach gently. This baby is going to know their mother is strong, powerful, unbreakable. You know what they're not going to know? You, because you're going to be in prison. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order. Benjamin tried to pull her back, but Victoria had said what she needed to say. She'd reclaimed her voice, and she was just getting started. Benjamin drove Victoria back to the Hayes estate in silence. Margaret sat in the back seat beside her daughter, holding her hand but saying nothing. Sometimes there were no words. Sometimes presence was enough. The estate looked exactly as Victoria remembered. Massive, imposing, a fortress of old money and older expectations. She'd run from this place 6 years ago, desperate for freedom. Now she was returning as a survivor, not a failure. Your room is exactly as you left it, Margaret said quietly as they pulled through the gates. I don't want my old room. That was for the girl who ran away. I'm someone different now. Then we'll set you up in the guest wing. Fresh start. Fresh start, what a concept. Could you ever really start fresh after everything that happened? Or were you always carrying the weight of your past, just redistributing it differently? Benjamin followed them inside, his briefcase full of documents that would reshape Victoria's life. Again, they gathered in the study, the same room where Victoria's father had explained the trust 6 years ago. The same room where she'd signed documents without reading them because she was young and angry and certain she'd never need legal protection. Thank God her father had been smarter than she was. The trust activated at 6 o'clock this morning, Benjamin began, spreading papers across the desk. You have full access to $3.2 billion in assets, stocks, properties, and liquid capital. Hayes Industries Board has been notified of your return. They're requesting a meeting. Not yet, Victoria said. First, we deal with Derek. Agreed. Now, about the prenuptial agreement. As I mentioned, you signed a blanket prenup when you were 23 that applies to any future marriage. Derek Callahan signed away any claim to your assets the moment you married him, whether he knew your real identity or not. He didn't, Victoria confirmed. I made sure of that. Well, he knows now, and based on the 3 attempts to access your trust, I'd say he's been planning this for a while, looking for a loophole, a way to claim emergency access or spousal rights. Victoria felt something cold settle in her chest. He knew. He had to know. That's what I think, Benjamin agreed. I think Derek Callahan has known exactly who you are for longer than we realize. The question is, how long? And how did he find out? Margaret added. Those questions haunted Victoria for the rest of the day. She took a bath, her first real bath in years, not the quick showers Derek timed. She ate food that wasn't carefully rationed. She sat in silence without jumping at every sound. But she couldn't stop thinking about Derek's face in the courtroom. The shock had been real, but had it been shock at her wealth? Or shock at being caught? Lillian arrived that evening with clothes and toiletries from Victoria's apartment, the place Victoria had shared with Derek for 3 years. I grabbed everything I thought you'd want, Lillian explained, setting bags down in the guest suite. Avoided anything he touched, but Victoria, there's something you should see. She pulled out Victoria's old journal, the one she'd kept hidden under a loose floorboard in the closet, the one where she'd documented every incident of abuse with dates and times and photographs. Why does it look like someone else has been reading it? Victoria took the journal with shaking hands. The spine was cracked differently. Pages were slightly bent. And there, on the inside cover, a fingerprint in ink that definitely wasn't hers. He found it, she whispered. Derek found my journal. When? I don't know, maybe months ago, maybe years. Victoria flipped through pages, her handwriting documenting the first slap, the first time he'd grabbed her throat, the progression of violence, and in the margins, in handwriting she didn't recognize, were notes. Too dramatic. Tone it down. No one will believe this. Make yourself more sympathetic. Derek hadn't just found her journal. He'd been editing it, coaching her on how to document abuse in a way that would be dismissed. He was planning ahead. Singing ahead, Benjamin said grimly when Victoria showed him the journal later, making sure that if you ever tried to report him, your own documentation would work against you. How is that even possible, Thumb? Because abusers are often incredibly intelligent. They plan, they manipulate, they prepare for every contingency. Benjamin's expression was fierce. But he didn't prepare for this. He didn't prepare for you being Victoria Hayes with unlimited resources. That night, Victoria lay in bed at the estate, staring at the ceiling. She'd taken her pain medication, her ribs ached. The baby kicked periodically, reminding her that she wasn't alone. But she felt alone, terrifyingly alone. She picked up her phone, her real phone, the one Derek didn't control, and did what she'd been doing for months. She Googled how to know if you're being repeated. The articles all said the same thing: isolation, control, gaslighting, physical violence, financial manipulation. She checked every box. Then she Googled, is it my fault if my husband hits me? The answer was always no. Always. But somehow she'd never believed it. Some part of her had internalized Derek's narrative that she was difficult, demanding, dramatic, that she provoked him, that she deserved what she got. But sitting in the safety of the Hayes estate with guards at the gate and her mother down the hall and Benjamin ready to fight, Victoria finally let herself believe the truth. It wasn't her fault. Nothing she'd done justified what Derek had done to her. The lying about her identity didn't justify it. The running away from her heritage didn't justify it. The being imperfect and human didn't justify it. Nothing justified it. I deserve better than this, she said out loud to the empty room. I always deserved better than this. Her voice sounded strange, unfamiliar. She'd spent so long making herself small, quiet, non-threatening. Hearing herself speak with conviction felt revolutionary. The worst part is that I knew, she continued, speaking to herself and to her baby and to the universe. Deep down, from the first slap, I knew this was wrong. But I stayed because leaving meant admitting failure. Admitting Dad was right. Admitting Victoria Hayes couldn't just be a normal person. She placed her hand on her belly, felt her daughter move beneath her palm. But you know what? Maybe normal is overrated. Maybe being Victoria Hayes isn't a curse. Maybe it's a responsibility. And maybe I can use this money, this power, this privilege to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to someone else. The baby kicked in response. Agreement, maybe, or just coincidence. Either way, Victoria smiled, her first genuine smile, and she couldn't remember how long. At 2 a.m, unable to sleep, Victoria made her way to her father's study. Margaret found her there an hour later, reading through old files and documents. Can't sleep? Her mother asked gently. Too much in my head. Victoria gestured to the papers spread across the desk. I'm reading Dad's notes from when he set up the trust. He was worried about me. He loved you. Of course he was worried. But he was also right. About everything, the prenup, the trust conditions, the legal protections. He knew I'd run, knew I'd probably fall for the wrong person, and he protected me anyway. Margaret sat in the chair across from the desk. Your father was a brilliant man. But more than that, he was a father who understood his daughter better than she understood herself. I was so angry at him, Victoria admitted. Those last few months, all the fighting about responsibility and legacy and preparing for the future. I thought he was trying to control me, but really, he was trying to save me. He would be so proud of you right now. For what? Getting beaten? Almost dying? For surviving, for fighting back, for reclaiming your power. Margaret's voice was fierce. That man tried to destroy you. Instead, you're going to destroy him. That's not revenge. That's justice, Heiress. Victoria thought about that distinction. Revenge versus justice. They sounded similar, but felt different. I want him to pay, she said slowly. Not just legally. I want him to understand exactly what he lost. I want him to know that every time he hit me, he was hitting a woman who could have given him everything. And now she's going to take everything from him. That's justice, Margaret confirmed, and we're going to make sure you get it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. mother and daughter, two women who'd lost years together but were finding their way back. "Mom," Victoria said eventually, "can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why didn't you look for me these past 5 years?" Margaret's expression softened with old pain. "Because you asked me not to. That last fight we had before you disappeared. You said you needed space to figure out who you were without being Thomas Hayes's daughter or Margaret's daughter. You said if I loved you, I'd let you go." "I said that?" "You did, and it killed me. But I respected your wishes. I had Benjamin keep that emergency phone active. Had lawyers monitoring any legal documents filed under your name or variations. Had investigators ready to move if you were ever in danger. But I didn't force my way back into your life because you'd asked for space." Victoria felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I'm sorry, I was so selfish. You were grieving and 23 and overwhelmed. There's nothing to forgive, baby girl. You came back when you were ready. That's all that matters." They hugged, carefully mindful of Victoria's injuries, but with the fierce love of two women who'd found their way back to each other. Later, back in her room, Victoria opened her laptop and started typing. Not a journal entry, not a letter, a statement. She was going to tell her story, all of it, and she was going to make sure every woman who felt trapped knew there was a way out, even if the way out looked different than expected, even if it meant becoming someone you'd spent years trying not to be, even if it meant admitting you needed help. Victoria Hayes was coming back, and Derek Callahan was about to learn what it meant to underestimate a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Derek's arraignment had been continued to later in the week, but the media circus had already begun. By morning, reporters camped outside the courthouse. The story was too good. Handsome financial advisor embezzles money, gets arrested, but they didn't know the half of it yet. They didn't know about Victoria Hayes. Benjamin advised waiting. Let Derek think he still had the upper hand. Let him post bail. His father James had already mortgaged his house, and believe he could spin this story. Then they'd destroy him. But Victoria wanted to see his face one more time before the world knew who she was. She wanted to watch him realize what he'd done. So despite every rational argument against it, despite Benjamin's protests and Margaret's concerns, Victoria dressed in that same Chanel dress and returned to the courthouse. Derek was already there when she arrived, surrounded by his public defender and his father. He looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. The orange jumpsuit had been replaced by an ill-fitting suit, but he couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. Their eyes met across the courtroom. Victoria watched him process her presence, the expensive clothes, the confidence in her posture, the way she sat like she owned the room, because legally she probably could buy this courthouse if she wanted. When the judge called the case, Benjamin stood once again. "Your Honor, Benjamin Ashford, again representing Victoria Hayes Worthington. I'd like to file additional charges on behalf of my client." The judge looked over his glasses. "Additional charges?" "Yes, Your Honor. We've uncovered evidence that Mr. Callahan knowingly and intentionally targeted my client based on her true identity. That he has been systematically planning to defraud her of her inheritance through marriage and manipulation. That his abuse was not crimes of passion, but calculated attempts to control and eventually murder a woman worth $3.2 billion. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Derek's face went absolutely white. "That's insane," he shouted. "I didn't know. She lied about who she was." "Did you?" Benjamin asked calmly. "Because we have evidence suggesting otherwise. Evidence we'll be happy to present to the court." "What evidence?" Derek's lawyer demanded. Benjamin pulled out a file. 3 attempts to access Victoria Hayes' trust fund over the past 6 months. Each attempt using detailed personal information about the beneficiary that Mr. Callahan should not have possessed given that his wife supposedly worked as a waitress. Each attempt citing family emergencies that never occurred. Each attempt carefully timed to moments when Mrs. Callahan was particularly vulnerable. He spread documents across the table. "We also have Mr. Callahan's documented internet search history. Searches including Hayes Industries Heiress, Victoria Hayes missing, how to access wife's trust fund, and marriage rights to inherited wealth. Searches dating back 3 years, to approximately 1 month after he married Victoria Hayes under her legal alias, Victoria Martin. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. He knew, Benjamin said clearly, from the very beginning or close to it, Derek Callahan knew exactly who he married. And he spent 3 years systematically abusing her while planning to defraud her of billions. Victoria watched Derek's face crumble, watched his lawyer frantically whisper, watched James Callahan put his head in his hands. Your Honor, the prosecutor stood now. Given this new evidence, the state requests that bail be revoked and the defendant be remanded to custody pending trial. Objection, Derek's lawyer jumped up. This is circumstantial at best. It's a pattern, Benjamin interrupted. A pattern of premeditation and fraud, combined with the attempted murder charge. This shows clear and present danger. The judge considered. Bail is revoked. Defendant is remanded to custody. We'll revisit at the preliminary hearing next week. Derek was led away in handcuffs, but before he disappeared through the back door, he turned one last time to look at Victoria. She met his gaze steadily. No fear, no guilt, just the calm certainty of a woman who'd reclaimed her power. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Victoria had prepared a brief statement with Benjamin's help. My name is Victoria Hayes Worthington. For the past 5 years, I've been living under an assumed identity, trying to escape the pressure of being a billionaire heiress. I thought I could have a normal life. Instead, I married a man who targeted me because of my wealth, then spent 3 years abusing me while planning to defraud my family's trust. She paused, letting that sink in. Derek Callahan is not a man who made mistakes. He's a predator who calculated every move. And I'm here today to make sure he faces justice for what he's done. Not just to me, but to other women he's hurt. Because I'm certain I'm not his first victim. Ms. Hayes, a reporter called out, why did you stay with him so long? Victoria looked directly into the camera. Because leaving felt more dangerous than staying. Because I thought I could fix him. Because he made me believe I was the problem. Because abuse doesn't start with fists. It starts with isolation and control and making you doubt your own reality. By the time the physical violence began, I was already trapped. Do you have a message for other abuse victims? Yes, you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You know what's happening to you is wrong, and there's help available. You don't have to have billions of dollars to escape. There are resources, shelters, lawyers who work pro bono. But most importantly, you deserve better. You always deserve better. The press conference lasted 20 minutes. Victoria answered questions honestly, vulnerably, powerfully. By the time she finished, Stand With Victoria was trending worldwide. But the hardest part was still ahead. Back at the estate, Victoria collapsed on her bed and let the adrenaline drain away. She'd done it. She'd publicly claimed her identity, told her story, started the process of holding Derek accountable. But she'd also opened herself up to scrutiny, judgment, questions she might not want to answer. Lillian appeared with tea and sympathy. You were amazing today. I was terrified. You didn't show it. Years of practice hiding fear, Victoria said wryly. Turns out that's a useful skill. They sat together quietly. Sat. Then Lillian said, can I tell you something? Always. The first time Derek raised his voice at you, that night I found you panic cleaning. I wanted to say something. I could see it in your face, the fear, but I didn't know how to bring it up without making you defensive. I would have been defensive, Victoria admitted. I wasn't ready to hear it. When do you think you were ready? Victoria thought about that. Maybe never. Maybe you're never really ready to admit you're in danger. You just hit a point where staying becomes more terrifying than leaving. For me, that point was when he tried to kill our baby. She touched her belly. 6 months along now, her daughter growing strong despite everything. What are you going to tell her? Lillian asked. About her father? The truth, age-appropriate truth, but truth that her father was a bad man who hurt people, that I did everything I could to protect her, that she doesn't carry his sins. Victoria's voice strengthened, and that she comes from a line of strong women who survived and thrived despite men trying to break them. That's a good story. It's our story. Might as well own it. That night, Victoria received a text from an unknown number. Just 4 words. We need to talk. Amber Sinclair, Derek's mistress. The woman who thought she was the girlfriend, not the other woman. Against everyone's advice, Victoria agreed to meet her. They met at a neutral location, a high-end hotel lobby that Margaret arranged. Security station nearby but out of sight. Lillian waiting in the car. Benjamin ready to intervene if needed. Victoria arrived first, dressed casually but expensively. She'd learned that looking powerful made her feel powerful. Fake it until you make it, as they said. Amber Sinclair walked in 10 minutes later, looking nothing like her Instagram photos. No filter could hide the dark circles under her eyes. No makeup could conceal the devastation on her face. She sat across from Victoria without greeting, just stared for a long moment. "You're really her," Amber finally said. "Victoria Hayes, the missing billionaire." "I'm really her. And you were married to Derek this whole time." "For 3 years." Amber's composure cracked. "He told me you were divorced, showed me papers, court documents, had this whole story about his crazy ex-wife who wouldn't let go. I believed him because, why wouldn't I? Why would someone lie about something like that?" "Because he's a liar," Victoria said simply. "It's what he does. It's what he is." "I gave him $60,000. Amber's voice broke. "For a down payment on a house we were going to buy together. I withdrew my entire savings. Money my grandmother left me. It's gone. All of it. I'm sorry." "Are you?" Amber's anger flared. "You're the billionaire wife. I'm the stupid mistress who got played. Why would you be sorry for me?" Victoria considered her answer carefully. "Because we're both victims. Different methods, same predator. He targeted you just like he targeted me. Made you believe in a future that never existed. Took your money, your trust, your sense of reality." "Did he?" Amber hesitated. "Did he ever hurt you? Physically, I mean?" "Yes, for 3 years. It started with emotional abuse, isolation, control, then escalated to physical violence. He tried to kill me 3 nights ago." Amber was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "He grabbed my wrist once. Last month, I questioned where money was going, and he twisted my wrist until I stopped asking. Then apologized, said he was stressed about work. I believed him because I wanted to believe him." "That's how it starts," Victoria said quietly. "Small incidents you rationalize, until rationalization becomes survival. Until you're so deep in the fog, you can't see reality anymore." They sat in silence for a while. Two women who should hate each other, united by shared trauma. "What are you going to do?" Amber finally asked. "I'm going to destroy him. Legally, financially, publicly. I'm going to make sure he never hurts anyone again." Victoria leaned forward. "What are you going to do?" Amber wiped her eyes. "I'm going to testify about the fraud, the fake divorce papers, the stolen money, all of it." Her voice grew stronger. "And then I'm going to warn every woman who comes after us, because there will be others. Men like Derek don't change. They just find new victims." Something unexpected happened in that moment. Victoria reached across the table and took Amber's hand. Two women bound by shared pain, choosing solidarity over animosity. "There's something else," Amber said after a moment. "Something I haven't told the police yet." "What?" "Derek has a storage unit. I only know because I saw the keys once in his wallet. Unit 247 at Safekeep Storage on Laurel Street. He doesn't know I know. But the way he protected that key, the way he panicked when I asked about it, I think there's something important there." Victoria felt ice slide down her spine. "What do you think is in it?" "I don't know, but whatever it is, he doesn't want anyone to find it." "Did you tell Detective Brennan?" "Not yet. I wanted to tell you first. Because if there's something in there about you, about what he did to you, I thought you deserved to know before it becomes evidence." Victoria pulled out her phone and called Benjamin. "We need to get into Derek's storage unit. Tonight." 3 hours later, Victoria stood outside Safekeep Storage with Benjamin, Lillian, Margaret, and a private security team. Detective Brennan had been notified and was en route, but they'd agreed Victoria could see the unit first. The manager, sufficiently motivated by Margaret's legal team, opened Unit 247 with shaking hands. What they found inside changed everything. 6 cardboard boxes. each labeled with a woman's name, each containing a meticulous record of a relationship, photos, love letters, financial documents, and detailed journals in Derek's handwriting documenting how he targeted, manipulated, extracted money from, and eventually discarded 6 different women. He's a serial romantic con artist, Benjamin said quietly, photographing the evidence. Each box follows the exact same pattern. Meet vulnerable woman, love bomb her, isolate her, extract money, move on. Victoria opened the box labeled Jennifer. Inside were familiar items, hospital photos showing bruises, police reports, a restraining order, and a note in feminine handwriting. To whoever finds this, he's a monster. I'm leaving this here in case something happens to me. Someone needs to know the truth. Jennifer. One of 6 women before Victoria. One of 6 Jennifers who tried to warn future victims. Here, Lillian said softly, pulling out another box. Catherine. Catherine Morgan. The name was familiar. Victoria had heard Derek mention her once years ago, an ex-girlfriend who died in an accident. He'd been so sad telling the story, so vulnerable. It had been a lie. Inside Catherine's box was a newspaper clipping. Local woman dies in suspicious fall. Catherine Morgan, age 31, died from injuries sustained in a fall-down basement stairs. The investigation concluded it was an accidental death. But beneath the clipping was Catherine's journal. The final entry was dated the day before she died. Derek says I'm clumsy, that I need to be more careful on the stairs. But I'm not clumsy. He pushed me last week, said it was an accident. But his eyes, I'm scared. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. Victoria's knees gave out. Lillian caught her before she hit the ground. He killed her, Victoria whispered. Derek killed Catherine, and I was supposed to be next. The baby kicked hard, as if in agreement, or protest, or just reminding Victoria that she was still alive. They were both still alive. There's one more box, Margaret said grimly. She pulled it out. The label read simply, Next. Inside was information about Amber, her social media profiles printed out, her bank statements, her work schedule, photos of her that Amber hadn't posed for, surveillance shots taken without her knowledge. He'd been stalking her for months before they accidentally met. But beneath Amber's folder was another one. This one made Victoria's blood run cold. A newspaper clipping about Victoria Hayes' disappearance 5 years ago. Her photo from her father's funeral, and handwritten notes in Derek's distinctive scrawl. Billionaire heiress, missing since father's death, worth billions. If found, long game. Ultimate score, patient approach required. He'd known from the very beginning. Derek Callahan had known exactly who Victoria Hayes was, had tracked her, found her, targeted her specifically because of her wealth. Every moment of their relationship had been a calculated con. How, Victoria asked, her voice barely audible. How did he find me? Benjamin examined the notes. Looks like he used a private investigator, tracked your name change, found your social security number, followed the trail to Lucky's diner, then engineered the meeting to seem accidental. 3 years, Victoria said. 3 years of pretending, of acting like he loved me. All for money I never spent, for a fortune he couldn't access. Until the baby, Margaret realized. With a baby, he could claim family emergency access to the trust, could sue for child support based on your actual wealth, could potentially get custody and control through the child. That's why he'd wanted her pregnant, why he'd poked holes in condoms, why he'd been so insistent she keep the baby when she'd first found out. Not because he wanted to be a father, because he wanted leverage. I'm going to be sick, Victoria said. She made it outside before throwing up in the bushes. When she finished, Margaret was there with water and tissues. No judgment, just mother love. What do we do now? Victoria asked. Now we make sure Derek Callahan never sees daylight as a free man again, Margaret said fiercely. We give this evidence to Detective Brennan. We file charges in Catherine Morgan's death. We find the other 5 women and get them justice too. And we make sure, Benjamin added, that every woman who encounters Derek Callahan knows exactly what he is before he can hurt anyone else. Victoria nodded, straightened, touched her belly where her daughter was growing. Okay, she said, let's destroy him. Detective Brennan arrived at the storage unit and immediately called in a forensics team. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable. A clear pattern of predatory behavior spanning at least 6 years and 7 victims. But as Benjamin reminded Victoria, evidence didn't always mean justice. Derek's attorney will argue that the storage unit was planted, that the notes are forgeries, that you're using your wealth to frame him, Benjamin explained in the car ride back to the estate. He'll say you're the scorned wife trying to destroy her husband for leaving. He didn't leave. He tried to kill me. I know, and we have medical evidence proving that. But in court, they're going to make this about you as much as about him. Let them try, Victoria said quietly. By the next morning, Catherine Morgan's case had been reopened. Her mother, Elena Morgan, had been contacted, and the story had exploded. Serial con artist targeted vulnerable women for years. Billionaire Heiress was latest victim in long pattern of abuse. Did Derek Callahan kill his girlfriend? The media was relentless. Victoria's face was everywhere. Old photos from her father's funeral, current photos from the courthouse. Side-by-side comparisons of Victoria Hayes missing heiress and Tori Martin diner waitress. She'd wanted to disappear 5 years ago. Now she couldn't hide if she tried. Benjamin filed motions. Margaret hired additional security. Lillian moved into the guest wing to provide support. And Victoria prepared for the reality that Derek would probably make bail. Sure enough, his father James mortgaged everything he owned and posted the $1 million bond. Within 48 hours of the storage unit discovery, Derek Callahan was released with an ankle monitor and a restraining order requiring him to stay 500 feet from Victoria at all times. Paper, Victoria said when Benjamin delivered the news. A restraining order is just paper. It won't stop him if he decides to come after me. That's why we have security, Margaret reminded her, and why you're staying here at the estate, behind gates and guards. But Victoria felt trapped again. Different than before, this was a gilded cage of safety rather than abuse, but still trapped. She made a decision then. She wasn't going to hide. Against every rational argument, against Benjamin's legal advice, against Margaret's maternal instincts, Victoria scheduled a press conference. If she was going to be exposed anyway, she'd control the narrative. The press conference was held at the Hayes Industries building. Victoria stood behind a podium bearing her family's logo, wearing a power suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and told her story, all of it. My name is Victoria Margaret Hayes Worthington. 5 years ago, after my father's death, I disappeared, changed my name, started over. I thought I could escape the pressure of being an heiress by becoming nobody. She paused, gathering strength. Instead, I met Derek Callahan, a man who targeted me specifically because of who I was, who tracked me down, found me, engineered our meeting to seem accidental, and then spent 3 years systematically abusing me while planning to defraud my family's trust fund. The room was silent except for camera shutters clicking. Derek Callahan is not a man who made mistakes. He's a predator who has been targeting vulnerable women for at least 6 years. We have evidence of 7 victims, including a woman named Catherine Morgan, who died in what was ruled an accidental fall. I believe Derek murdered her, and I believe I was supposed to be next. She touched her belly, 6 months pregnant now and showing. But I survived, and now I'm using every resource I have to ensure Derek Callahan faces justice, not just for what he did to me, but for all the women he's hurt. Ms. Hayes, a reporter called out, if you're so wealthy, why didn't you just leave? Victoria looked directly at the camera. Because abuse isn't about money, it's about power and control. I could have billions of dollars and still feel trapped. Derek made me believe I was worthless, that I was crazy, that I deserved what was happening to me. And when you believe those things deeply enough, money doesn't matter. Access to resources doesn't matter. You're still trapped in your own mind. Another reporter, what do you want people to know about domestic violence? That it can happen to anyone. Rich women, poor women, educated women, strong women. It doesn't discriminate, and the hardest part isn't leaving, though that's terrifying. The hardest part is admitting it's happening in the first place. She gripped the podium, her voice growing stronger. I'm here today to make an announcement. I'm establishing the Victoria Hayes Foundation for Domestic Violence Prevention and Survivor Support. Initial funding will be $100 million. We'll be building safe houses, funding legal representation, providing financial assistance for women leaving abusive relationships, because money shouldn't be the reason anyone stays in danger. The press conference went viral within minutes. Hashtag I Stand With Victoria trended worldwide. Survivors shared their stories. Support poured in from unexpected places. But at home that night, alone in her room at the estate, Victoria broke down. The public bravery had cost her private tears. What if it's not enough, she asked Lillian, who'd stayed with her. What if he gets away with it anyway? Then we keep fighting, Lillian said simply. But Victoria, you've already won in ways that matter. You survived. You're telling the truth. You're helping other women. That's victory. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like I'm drowning. Lillian ran a bath without asking, added lavender oil, helped Victoria into the warm water, and just sat beside the tub while her friend cried. Sometimes healing wasn't about doing anything. It was about sitting with pain and not running from it. After an hour in the bath, Victoria emerged feeling slightly more human. She sat on her bed, wrapped in a fluffy robe that cost more than Derek's monthly salary, and thought about the woman she used to be. The girl who'd run away 5 years ago had been scared and overwhelmed but fundamentally strong. She'd survived her father's death, survived taking over a company she wasn't ready to run, survived being thrust into the spotlight at 23 years old. And the woman who'd endured 3 years of abuse had been strong too, surviving each day, protecting herself in small ways, keeping journals and hiding evidence, and maintaining the one friendship that might save her. Maybe she'd never been weak. Maybe she'd been strong all along and just couldn't see it. The therapist asked me something today, Victoria said to Lillian. Grace, my new therapist, she asked when I first knew I was in danger. What did you tell her? I said it was the first time Derek hit me, but that was a lie. Victoria pulled her knees to her chest, careful of her belly. I knew the first time he criticized what I was wearing, the first time he checked my phone, the first time he said, I just love you so much it makes me crazy. She looked at Lillian. Love doesn't make you crazy. Love makes you kind. It makes you patient and generous and better than you were before. What Derek felt wasn't love. It was possession, ownership, the desire to control. When did you realize that? Probably always knew it, but knowing and admitting are different things. I couldn't admit it because admitting it meant I'd failed at being normal, that I'd run away from my heritage for nothing, that my father was right to worry. Your father would be proud of you, Lillian said firmly. Not for being strong enough to endure abuse, no parent wants that for their child, but for being strong enough to escape it, to fight back, to use your resources to help others. Victoria wanted to believe that. Some days she did. Other days the shame was overwhelming. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Derek Callahan gives interview, claims wife entrapped him. Victoria clicked the link with shaking hands. There was Derek, sitting on a morning show couch looking handsome and wounded, and so convincing in his lies. She catfished me, he told the sympathetic host. Pretended to be someone she wasn't. Got pregnant to trap me. And now she's using her billions to destroy my life because I wanted out of the marriage. The host, a woman who should know better, asked about the domestic violence charges. Derek's response was smooth as silk. We fought. All couples fight. But I never hit her. She's pregnant and hormonal. The hospital visit was her idea, to build a case against me. And now she's vindictive because I fell in love with someone else. Victoria felt rage burn through the exhaustion. He was good at this, really good. Playing the victim while victimizing. Half the internet believed him. The comments were vicious. Rich woman ruins man's life. She's just mad he wouldn't stay with her. Where's the proof? Women lie about abuse all the time. But the other half of the internet remembered the press conference. The evidence, the storage unit, Catherine Morgan's death. He's a monster. Believe women. I stand with Victoria. Lock him up. The internet was split, which meant a jury could be split too. We have more evidence than most domestic violence cases ever get, Benjamin reminded her when she called him, panicking. The medical records, the journals, the storage unit, Catherine's journal, 6 other victims willing to testify. This is as close to a slam dunk as abuse cases get. But what if it's not enough? Then we appeal. We keep fighting. But Victoria, you've already done the hardest part. You survived. You spoke up. You refused to stay silent. That matters more than you know. That night, Victoria fell asleep on the couch in her father's study, surrounded by his books and his papers and his presence that somehow still lingered in this room. She dreamed of Catherine Morgan, a woman she'd never met but felt connected to, a woman who'd tried to warn future victims and paid with her life. In the dream, Catherine said, "You have what I didn't, resources, a voice people will listen to, don't waste it. Make my death mean something." Victoria woke with tears on her face and a fierce determination in her heart. Derek wanted to play the victim? Fine. She'd show him what real victimization looked like. And then she'd show him what real justice looked like too. Victoria spent the next morning with Grace Sullivan, her trauma therapist. 3 sessions a week were scheduled now, and Victoria was beginning to understand how deep the damage went. "Tell me about the Google searches," Grace said gently. Victoria flushed with shame. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do, the 3 in the morning searches. How to know if you're being abused. Is it my fault if my husband hits me? You mentioned them last session." Victoria looked at her hands. "I would search on incognito mode, then immediately clear the history even though incognito doesn't save history. Like I was afraid the questions themselves were evidence against me." "What were you most afraid the searches would confirm?" "That I was crazy, that I was overreacting, that this was normal marriage stuff and I was being dramatic." Victoria's voice dropped. "Or worse, that it was abuse and I was too weak to leave." "You're not weak. Then why did I stay?" "Because leaving is dangerous. Statistically, the most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is when they try to leave. Your instincts were protecting you until you had a safe way out." "I didn't leave though. He almost killed me. If I hadn't fought back, if the baby hadn't been in danger, I might have stayed forever. But you did fight back and you are leaving. You're doing it now in the safest way possible, with resources and support and legal protection." Victoria wanted to believe that. Some part of her did. But another part, the part Derek had been carefully cultivating for 3 years, whispered that she was weak and dramatic and making too big a deal out of things. "There's something else," Victoria admitted. "Something I haven't told anyone. You can tell me." The worst Google search wasn't "Am I being abused?" It was "How to make him love me again." Grace waited quietly. "I searched for that more than anything else. Like there was a magic formula. A perfect version of myself that would make the hitting stop. I'd spend hours reading articles about how to be a better wife, how to communicate more effectively, how to avoid triggering your partner. Like if I could just figure out the right way to be, he'd go back to being the man I married." "And what happened when you tried to be that perfect version?" "He'd hit me anyway, for different reasons. And I'd think I hadn't gotten it quite right yet. Needed to try harder, be better, make myself smaller." "Victoria," Grace said firmly, "there is no version of you that would have made Derek stop hitting you. Because the abuse was never about you. It was always about him, about his need for control and power. You could have been perfect and he still would have found reasons to hurt you." Intellectually, Victoria knew this was true. Emotionally, she was still learning to believe it. They talked for the rest of the session about self-blame and internalized shame, about how abusers are skilled at making victims believe the abuse is their fault, about how healing required learning to separate what Derek had done from who Victoria was. After therapy, Victoria returned to the estate to find Benjamin waiting with news. "Derek's giving another interview tonight, prime time." "Of course he is. His lawyer thinks if they can sway public opinion, it'll influence the jury pool, make the charges harder to prove." "What do you want to do, Margaret asked, joining them in the study. Victoria thought about it. Derek was good at playing victim, good at manipulating narratives. But he'd never counted on Victoria having resources to match his lies with truth. "I want to release everything," she said finally. "All of it. The storage unit photos, the police reports from his previous victims. Catherine Morgan's journal, the text messages where he bragged about landing the billionaire, every piece of evidence we have. That's risky, Benjamin warned. Some of it might be excluded from trial if we release it publicly first. I don't care about trial strategy anymore. I care about making sure everyone knows the truth before Derek can spin more lies. She looked at Margaret, then Benjamin. Can we do it? We can do anything you want, Margaret said firmly. You're Victoria Hayes. If you want to buy a Super Bowl ad to expose Derek Callahan, we can buy a Super Bowl ad. They didn't buy a Super Bowl ad, Owen, but they did something almost as dramatic. By the time Derek's primetime interview aired that evening, Victoria had already flooded social media with evidence. Photos of the storage unit boxes, scanned pages from Catherine's journal, police reports from 6 previous victims, financial records showing Derek's embezzlement, and the secret recording Lillian had made the night before Derek's worst attack. Him telling a friend on the phone, "She's pregnant," which complicates things, but once the kid is born, I can leverage it for child support. Maybe even get control of her trust fund if I play this right. Worst case, I'll make her so miserable she pays me to go away. The recording was damning, undeniable. Derek's own words proving everything Victoria had claimed. By the time his interview started, the internet had already convicted him. Derek appeared on screen, handsome in a button-down shirt, his ankle monitor carefully hidden. He told his sob story about being deceived, about falling in love with a woman who wasn't who she claimed, about trying to make a marriage work despite her lies. But his Twitter mentions were already exploding with the evidence Victoria had released. Screenshots of Catherine's journal overlaid on his interview. Audio of his recorded confession played over his lies. Within 20 minutes, the interview was being roasted across every platform. The host, the same sympathetic woman from his first interview, was being criticized for not fact-checking. The network was being accused of giving a platform to an abuser, and Derek's narrative crumbled in real time. That's how you control a narrative, Margaret said, with satisfaction as they watched social media metrics together. You flood the zone with truth before lies can take root. Victoria felt a grim satisfaction, but also exhaustion. The constant battle was wearing her down. I'm tired, she admitted to Lillian later. I know we're winning, I know he's being exposed, but I'm so tired of fighting. Then rest, Lillian said simply. You don't have to fight every battle personally. That's why you have lawyers and a PR team and an entire foundation being set up. Delegate. I can't. Yes, you can. You survived. You spoke up. You provided evidence. Now let other people handle the execution while you focus on healing. It was good advice. Hard to take, but good. That night, Grace had given Victoria homework. Write a letter to her past self, to the woman who'd walked into Lucky's Diner 5 years ago, running from her legacy and straight into danger. Victoria sat at her father's desk and began writing. Dear Tori, you're about to meet a man who seems perfect. He's not. But you won't believe me if I tell you that, so I'll tell you this instead. When you're sitting in that car in the driveway, unable to go inside, that's the moment. That's when you leave. Not after the next fight, not after you fix yourself, right then. When home feels more dangerous than anywhere else in the world, you've already stayed too long, you're going to think the bruises are your fault. They're not. You're going to think love is supposed to hurt this much. It's not. You're going to think you can save him if you just love him enough. You can't. Some people don't want to be saved. They want hostages. But Tori, future you survives, not just survives, thrives. You get out, you fight back. You reclaim everything you gave away trying to be small. And that baby you're growing, she's going to know a mother who's powerful, not in spite of her scars, but because she turned them into wisdom. So when you're afraid, and you will be afraid, remember that I'm here, in the future, waiting for you, proof that there's life after this. Good life, real life. You're stronger than you know, worth more than he says, deserving of more than survival. Love, Victoria. She read the letter aloud to Grace the next day during their session. Grace asked if she could share it anonymously with survivors groups. By the end of the week, Victoria's letter had been printed, posted, and read by thousands of women in bathroom mirrors and support groups around the world. It became a rallying cry. When home feels more dangerous than anywhere else, You've already stayed too long. Victoria had wanted to disappear 5 years ago. Now her voice was echoing everywhere. And Derek Callahan's voice was being drowned out by truth he couldn't spin or manipulate away. The trial was set for 6 months out. 6 months of preparation, 6 months of healing, 6 months of waiting while Derek remained free on bail, monitored but still able to spread his version of events. But Victoria was learning something important. She didn't have to fight every battle personally. Benjamin handled the legal strategy. Margaret managed the foundation setup. A team of lawyers tracked down Derek's previous victims. And Victoria focused on the two things that mattered most: healing and preparing for her daughter's arrival. 3 months pregnant had become six. Six became seven. And suddenly Victoria was 35 weeks along and nesting in the safest, most bizarre way possible. She converted an entire wing of the Hayes estate into a mother-baby suite, not just a nursery, an entire support system. Lillian had taken a leave of absence from the hospital to serve as Victoria's birth coach and postpartum nurse. Margaret had hired the best pediatrician in the state, and Grace came twice a week for therapy sessions that were helping Victoria process trauma before her daughter arrived. "You're building a fortress," Grace observed during one session. "Is that bad?" "No, it's adaptive. You're creating safety after years of danger." "That's healthy, but I want you to think about what happens when your daughter gets older, when she wants to go to school, make friends, have experiences outside the fortress." "I'll cross that bridge when I come to it," Victoria said. "Will you? Or will you keep her trapped the way Derek kept you trapped, just with love instead of fear?" The question stung because it was fair. Victoria was so focused on protecting her daughter that she hadn't considered whether protection could become its own cage. "I don't want to be like him," Victoria whispered. "You won't be. You're aware. You're working on healing. You're breaking the cycle. But awareness means acknowledging that trauma can make us overprotective. That fear can make us controlling even when our intentions are pure." Victoria thought about that for days, about the line between protection and control, about how to keep her daughter safe without keeping her small. In her 7th month, Victoria started attending a support group for domestic violence survivors. She went anonymously, just another woman trying to heal, and listened to stories that echoed her own. A woman who'd stayed for 10 years because her husband controlled all the money. A woman who'd left and returned 5 times before finally escaping. A woman who'd been strangled unconscious twice and still believed maybe she'd provoked him. Victoria's wealth made her situation unique, but her trauma was universal. "The hardest part," one woman said during group, "isn't proving he hurt you. It's accepting that I love someone who never existed. The man I fell in love with was a character he played, and mourning a fiction is the strangest grief of all." Victoria felt those words in her bones. She'd spent weeks grieving the loss of her marriage before realizing there had never been a real marriage to lose, just a con artist playing house while planning his next move. "How do you get past it?" Victoria asked the woman after group. "You don't get past it, you get through it, and then you build something better on the other side." Building something better became Victoria's focus. The foundation was operational now, with 3 safe houses in different cities. They'd helped 83 women leave abusive situations in just 2 months. The number should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt devastating that there were so many women who needed help. But at least help existed now. One afternoon, Victoria received a call from an unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Too many reporters and trolls had gotten her cell, but something made her pick up. "Is this Victoria Hayes?" A woman's voice, older and weary. "Yes." "My name is Elena Morgan. I'm Catherine's mother." Victoria's breath caught. Catherine Morgan, the woman Derek had killed. "I wanted to thank you," Elena continued, "for finally getting justice for my daughter, for proving she didn't just fall, for making sure no one else's daughter becomes another Catherine." They talked for over an hour. Elena shared memories of Catherine, a bright, loving woman who'd believed Derek's lies until it was too late. Victoria shared what she knew from Catherine's journal and the storage unit evidence. "My daughter left that note hoping someone would find it," Elena said. "Hoping someone would be smart enough to see through Derek's act. You survived. and you used your survival to expose him. I should have left sooner, Victoria said, guilt heavy in her chest. And Catherine should have left sooner, and 6 other women should have left sooner. But you know what? You all did the best you could with what you knew at the time. That's all anyone can do. After the call ended, Victoria sat in her father's study and cried. Not for herself this time, but for Catherine, for the 6 other women in those storage unit boxes, for every woman who'd loved Derek Callahan and paid the price. She was 8 months pregnant now, huge and uncomfortable and ready to be done. The baby moved constantly, pressing on her ribs where Derek's fists had cracked them, a painful reminder of what she'd survived and what was coming. Victoria spent an afternoon in the greenhouse her father had built. Among the orchids and ferns, she found his old gardening journal. The last entry was dated a week before he died. Victoria is struggling with the weight of inheritance. I worry I've trapped her in a cage made of gold, but I hope someday she understands. The money isn't the inheritance. The strength to wield it wisely is. She has that strength, she just doesn't know it yet. My greatest wish is that she discovers it not through obligation, but through choice, that she becomes powerful not because she has to, but because she wants to. Reading her father's words 5 years later, Victoria finally understood. He hadn't been trying to control her, he'd been trying to protect her. The prenup, the trust conditions, the emergency protocols, all of it was him, trying to save her from future dangers he couldn't fight himself. I get it now, Dad, she whispered to the orchids. I finally get it. That evening, Victoria received a call from Jennifer, one of Derek's previous victims, whose box had been in the storage unit. I saw your foundation. I want to help, and I want to testify at the trial. Make sure Derek never does this to anyone else. By the end of the week, 4 of Derek's 6 previous victims had reached out. They wanted to stand together, wanted their voices heard, wanted justice not just for themselves, but for future women who might encounter Derek Callahan. Victoria organized a meeting, not as the billionaire leader, but as a fellow survivor. They sat in a circle at one of the foundation's safe houses, sharing stories and tears and fierce determination. He made me think I was crazy, one woman said. He made me think I deserved it, said another. He made me think no one would believe me, said a third. Well, Victoria said, looking around the circle, we all believe each other, and we're going to make a jury believe us too. They planned their testimony together, not coordinating lies, just ensuring they each told their truth in a way that showed the pattern. The same love bombing, the same isolation, the same escalation, the same financial exploitation. Derek's defense attorney would call them bitter exes, gold diggers, women scorned, but 6 women with the exact same story. That was a pattern, and patterns were evidence. As Victoria drove home that night, 8 months pregnant and exhausted but strangely hopeful, she thought about power, how she'd spent 5 years trying to give it away, how Derek had spent 3 years trying to take it, and how she was finally learning to claim it on her own terms. Not because she had to, because she chose to, and that made all the difference. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in November. Victoria was 38 weeks pregnant, uncomfortable and huge, but determined to be there for every moment. The courthouse was packed. Media lined up outside. Protesters on both sides, some supporting Victoria, others convinced Derek was being railroaded by a vindictive rich woman. Inside, Victoria sat in the front row of the gallery, flanked by Margaret and Lillian. Benjamin sat at the prosecutor's table as a supporting attorney, and Derek sat at the defense table in a suit that probably cost his father's savings, looking wounded and innocent. He was good at looking innocent. Jury selection had taken 3 days. They'd ended up with 7 women and 5 men, ages ranging from 24 to 68, a decent mix. But Victoria knew from bitter experience that women could be Derek's harshest judges. Internalized misogyny was real. The prosecutor's opening statement was strong. She laid out the pattern of abuse, the storage unit evidence, Catherine Morgan's death, the financial fraud, the attempted murder. She painted Derek as a calculating predator who'd targeted vulnerable women for years. Then Derek's attorney stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a case about a woman scorned, a billionaire heiress who lied about her identity, trapped my client in a marriage based on deception, and is now using her unlimited resources to destroy him for the crime of falling in love with someone else. Victoria's hands clenched into fists. Lillian squeezed her arm in warning. Victoria Hayes Worthington is a master manipulator, the defense attorney continued. She spent 5 years pretending to be someone she wasn't. She married my client under false pretenses. She got pregnant to trap him. And when he tried to leave, she used her wealth to frame him for crimes he didn't commit. It was disgusting, effective, and completely expected. The first week of trial focused on the embezzlement charges. Client after client testified about Derek's theft. Elderly people who trusted him with their retirement savings. People he'd charmed and manipulated and robbed. The defense tried to claim Victoria had access to his client files and planted evidence, but the timeline didn't support it. Derek had been stealing long before Victoria came back as Victoria Hayes. The second week focused on the domestic violence charges. Victoria testified first. She'd prepared for this, practiced with Grace, rehearsed with Benjamin, but nothing could prepare her for sitting 15 feet from Derek and describing in detail everything he'd done to her. Tell the jury about the first time he hit you, the prosecutor asked. Victoria took a breath. 8 months into our marriage, we were at a party. I laughed at another man's joke. When we got home, Derek asked what I thought was so funny. I said it was just a joke. He slapped me across the face, then immediately apologized, cried, said he didn't know what came over him, that he loved me too much and it made him crazy. What did you do? I believed him. I thought it was a one-time thing, a mistake. When did it happen again? 3 months later, he came home angry about work. Dinner wasn't ready. He grabbed my wrist and twisted until I cried out. Then he left for 2 hours. When he came back, he acted like nothing happened. She continued through the timeline. Each incident slightly worse than the last. The gradual isolation from friends, the control of finances, the monitoring of her phone, the verbal abuse that preceded physical violence. And the night you ended up in the hospital? The prosecutor asked. Victoria touched her belly. Her daughter moved beneath her hand as if offering support. I told Derek I was keeping the baby. He'd been pressuring me to consider abortion. Said we couldn't afford a child. I'd finally realized I was pregnant because he'd tampered with our birth control. I was angry. I said I was keeping the baby no matter what he wanted. What happened then? He grabbed me by the throat, slammed me against the kitchen counter, punched me in the ribs repeatedly. I fought back for the first time, scratched his face, tried to get away. That made him angrier. He threw me to the floor and kept hitting me. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was him saying, "You think you're special? You're nothing. You're nobody. And this baby is my meal ticket to something better." The courtroom was silent. Mrs. Callahan, or Ms. Hayes, why did you stay with him so long? Victoria looked directly at the jury. Because leaving felt more dangerous than staying. Because I thought I could fix him. Because I loved who he pretended to be and kept hoping that person would come back. Because abuse doesn't start with fists. It starts with isolation, criticism, control. By the time the hitting started, I was so turned around, I didn't trust my own judgment anymore. She paused, gathering strength for the hardest part. You think maybe you are crazy. Maybe you are overreacting. Maybe if you just try harder, love better, become smaller, it'll stop, so you stay. Not because you're weak, but because you've been systematically broken down into believing you deserve exactly what you're getting. Several jurors were crying. Even the judge looked moved. Then came Derek's attorney's cross-examination. Ms. Hayes, isn't it true that you lied to my client about your identity for your entire relationship? Yes. You married him under a false name? I married him under my legal name at the time, Victoria Martin. But yes, that was a name I'd legally changed to. So you admit to being deceptive? I admit to protecting my privacy after trauma. That's different from being deceptive. Is it? The attorney's voice dripped with skepticism. You had billions of dollars and pretended to be poor. How is that not deceptive? Because my wealth had nothing to do with our relationship. I didn't use it, didn't spend it, didn't even access it. I lived on my waitress salary, paid my share of bills, didn't ask Derek for anything financial. Except you could have revealed the truth at any time. You chose not to. I chose privacy. That's my right. And now you're using your wealth to destroy my client's life. No, Victoria said firmly. I'm using my wealth to seek justice for what he did. There's a difference. The cross-examination continued for hours. The defense attorney tried to paint Victoria as a master manipulator, a liar, a woman who'd trapped Derek and now wanted revenge. But Victoria held firm, stayed calm, answered honestly. When she finally stepped down from the stand, she felt wrung out but victorious. She told her truth. Whether the jury believed it was out of her hands now. The third week brought Derek's previous victims. One by one, they testified to the exact same pattern. Love bombing, isolation, control, financial exploitation, physical violence. Jennifer testified about the restraining order she'd filed, about Derek violating it repeatedly, about the terror of never feeling safe. Sarah testified about the $60,000 Derek had stolen from her grandmother's inheritance, money she'd never seen again. Rachel testified about Derek's stalking behavior after she left, the surveillance photos he'd taken, the threats he'd made, and Elena Morgan testified about her daughter, Catherine, about the accident that had never felt accidental, about the journal entry warning future victims. By the time Catherine's journal was read aloud in court, there wasn't a dry eye in the jury box. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. Derek pushed me before, he'll do it again. Someone needs to know the truth. The defense tried to discredit each woman, called them gold diggers despite none of them being wealthy, called them bitter exes despite Derek having stolen from or assaulted each one, called them liars despite their stories matching perfectly. But 6 women with identical experiences? That wasn't coincidence. That was pattern. The fourth week was Derek's turn. His attorney put him on the stand to tell his side. Derek was charming, vulnerable. He admitted to making mistakes, to being imperfect, but he painted himself as the victim of multiple women who'd used him, lied to him, and now wanted to destroy him. I loved Victoria, he said, tears in his eyes. I didn't know she was rich. I thought we were building a life together. When she got pregnant, I was happy. And then she turned on me, used her money to make me look like a monster. It was a good performance, but the prosecutor was better. Mr. Callahan, you claim you didn't know Victoria Hayes was wealthy, but we have evidence of multiple searches on your computer for Victoria Hayes' heiress, Hayes Industries' fortune, and how to access wife's trust fund. How do you explain that? Derek faltered. Those must have been planted. By whom? I don't know. Victoria has unlimited resources. She could have hired someone to hack my computer. Do you have any evidence of this hacking? No, but let's talk about the storage unit. You had bayous containing information on 6 previous girlfriends, detailed financial records, journals documenting how you'd manipulated them. How do you explain that? Those boxes aren't mine. Someone planted them. Someone planted 6 boxes of evidence in a storage unit you've been paying for 4 years? Yes. Mr. Callahan, isn't it true that you're a con artist who's been targeting vulnerable women for years? That you find them, love bomb them, isolate them, steal from them, and move on to the next target? No, that's insane. Then why does 6 different women have the exact same story about you? Derek had no good answer. The trial lasted 5 weeks total. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, Victoria held her breath. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of aggravated assault, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of second-degree murder, in the death of Catherine Morgan, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on every count. Derek's face crumbled. His father sobbed in the gallery. His attorney slumped in defeat. The judge didn't mince words during sentencing. Mr. Callahan, you are a predator. You systematically targeted vulnerable women, exploited their trust, and violently controlled them. You murdered Catherine Morgan and attempted to murder Victoria Hayes Worthington. You have shown no remorse, no understanding of the harm you've caused. I'm sentencing you to 25 years to life in state prison, with no possibility of parole for 20 years. 20 years. Victoria's daughter would be in college before Derek was eligible for parole. As Derek was led away in handcuffs, he looked at Victoria one final time. She met his gaze steadily. No fear, no anger, just the quiet certainty of a woman who'd reclaimed her power and used it to ensure justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Victoria made a brief statement. Justice was served today, not just for me, but for Catherine Morgan and all the women Derek Callahan hurt. This verdict sends a message that domestic violence will not be tolerated, that predatory behavior will be punished, that survivors will be believed. She touched her belly. My daughter will grow up knowing her mother fought for justice. That's the legacy I choose to give her. That night, Victoria went into labor. Labor was long, 36 hours of contractions and exhaustion and pain that somehow felt cleansing. Like her body was purging the last 3 years of trauma, along with bringing new life into the world. Lillian stayed with her the entire time. Margaret too. And when Victoria was too tired to push anymore, when she wanted to give up, they reminded her what she was fighting for. At 3:47 on a Tuesday morning, Victoria Hayes gave birth to a healthy baby girl, 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Perfect. Beautiful. Hers. What's her name? The nurse asked. Victoria looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and knew instantly. Catherine. Catherine Grace Hayes. Catherine for the woman who didn't survive. Grace for the therapist who helped her heal. Hayes because this baby belonged to no man. She belonged to herself. Margaret cried. Lillian cried. Even Benjamin, standing in the corner with flowers, wiped his eyes. Hello, Catherine. Victoria whispered to her daughter. You're safe. You're loved. And you're going to grow up knowing you come from a line of strong women who survived impossible things. The baby opened her eyes, dark blue, like all newborns, and seemed to look directly at her mother, as if sealing a pact, a promise between them. Victoria stayed in the hospital for 3 days, not because of medical necessity, the birth was uncomplicated, but because she needed the cocoon, the safety, the controlled environment before facing the real world as a mother. Reporters tried to get photos, offered obscene amounts of money for a picture of the billionaire, Heiress's baby, but Margaret's security team held firm. This moment was private, sacred, not for public consumption. On the 3rd day, Victoria was cleared to go home, not to the small apartment she'd shared with Derek, not to the life she'd been living, home to the Hayes estate, where a nursery waited and support surrounded her. The first week was a blur of sleepless nights and learning to breastfeed and the overwhelming terror that comes with being solely responsible for a tiny human. But Victoria wasn't alone. Lillian guided her through everything. Margaret brought tea at 2 in the morning, and Grace did video sessions where Victoria cried about being a mother while traumatized, and Grace gently reminded her that healing wasn't linear. You're doing great, Grace said during one session, while Victoria held a sleeping Catherine. I don't feel like I'm doing great. I feel like I'm barely holding it together. That's what great looks like sometimes, showing up despite being terrified, choosing love despite fear, breaking generational patterns. That's heroic, Victoria. Victoria looked down at her daughter, at this perfect, innocent being who would never know her father, who would grow up hearing carefully crafted, age-appropriate truths about why Daddy wasn't in their lives. What do I tell her, Victoria asked, when she's old enough to ask? You tell her the truth that her father was a bad man who hurt people, that you protected her the only way you could, that his absence is a gift, not a punishment, that she doesn't carry his sins. Will she believe that? If you believe it first, yes. 3 months passed in a haze of diapers and feedings and slowly healing. Derek's appeals were denied. He was serving his sentence at a maximum security facility upstate. Legally, Victoria had full custody. Derek had no parental rights, a rare legal victory made possible by his attempted murder conviction. Catherine would never have to visit her father in prison, would never have to navigate supervised visits or custody exchanges. would never have to wonder if Daddy might hurt her. She was free in a way Victoria had never been. The foundation was thriving. In 3 months, they'd helped 847 women leave abusive situations. 847 lives saved or redirected. The number should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt overwhelming that so many needed help. But at least help existed now. Victoria met with the Coalition of Survivors monthly. They'd become friends, real friends, bound by shared experience, but not defined by it. Jennifer was back in school studying social work. Amber had started her own real estate company, this time built on honest foundations. The others were rebuilding too, each at their own pace. "We should toast," Amber said at one lunch, raising her glass of lemonade. "To the women we were, who survived. To the women we are, who are thriving. And to the women we're becoming, who won't be defined by him." They clinked glasses, laughed, shared stories about dating again or choosing not to, about therapy breakthroughs and setbacks, about the messy, nonlinear process of healing. "Do you ever think about him?" Jennifer asked Victoria quietly. "Sometimes," Victoria admitted, "when Catherine reaches a milestone, when something triggers a memory. But then I look at what I've built from the ashes of what he tried to destroy, and I realize he didn't break me. He refined me, burned away everything that wasn't essential, and what remained was stronger than he could ever imagine." It was true, the woman Victoria had become bore little resemblance to the girl who'd run away 5 years ago, or the victim who'd endured 3 years of abuse. She was something new, something forged in fire and emerging as steel. The Hayes Industries board had welcomed her back cautiously, but after seeing her manage the foundation, her strategic thinking, her ability to lead under pressure, they'd recognized what her father had always known. Victoria Hayes Worthington was born for this. She started attending board meetings, contributing ideas, slowly taking on more responsibility, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because she'd finally learned that power wasn't something to fear or give away. It was a tool, and tools could be used for good or evil depending on the hand that wielded them. Victoria chose good. 6 months after Catherine's birth, Victoria stood at a podium at the Foundation's first major gala. Donors filled the ballroom, survivors stood alongside supporters, and Catherine slept peacefully backstage with Margaret, babbling in her sleep the way 6-month-olds do. "When I disappeared 5 years ago," Victoria told the crowd, "I was running from responsibility, from expectations, from the weight of a legacy I didn't think I deserved. And in trying to escape my inheritance, I walked straight into a nightmare." She paused, gathering strength. "But that nightmare taught me the most important lesson of my life. Power isn't something you are born with or born into. It's something you choose every day, every moment, in the face of fear and violence, and people who want you small. You choose to stand tall. You choose to fight back. You choose to use whatever resources you have, whether it's billions of dollars or just the strength to leave, to save yourself." The room was silent, listening. "And then, if you're lucky, you turn around and help save someone else." She looked around at the faces in the crowd, at the survivors who'd become advocates, at the donors making this work possible, at her mother standing in the back with tears streaming down her face. "Derek Callahan tried to destroy me. Instead, he destroyed himself. And from the rubble of that destruction, I built something he could never imagine. Not revenge, not even justice, something better." Her voice grew stronger, more certain. "A future where women like me, like Jennifer, like Amber, like Catherine," her voice caught on her daughter's name, "never have to choose between a safety and dignity. Where leaving is always possible. Where violence is never acceptable. Where power is used to protect, not to harm." The room erupted in applause, but Victoria wasn't finished. "In the past 6 months, we've helped 847 women escape domestic violence. 847 lives redirected towards safety, but there are millions more who still need help. Millions more who are sitting in their cars right now, unable to go inside. Millions more who are Googling, 'Am I being abused?' at 3 in the morning. Millions more who think they're crazy because someone's telling them they are." She locked eyes with the camera in the back, knowing this speech would be broadcast. "If you're watching this and you're afraid, you're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're not alone. You deserve better. And there is help available. The Victoria Hayes Foundation is here. But there are also local resources, national hotlines, lawyers who work pro bono. You have options, more options than you think. The speech lasted 15 minutes. By the time Victoria finished, donations had exceeded projections by $3 million. $3 million more dollars to save lives, to provide safety, to give women the resources to escape. After the gala, Margaret found Victoria backstage, holding a sleeping Catherine. "Your father would be so proud of you," Margaret whispered. "I did it for her," Victoria said, kissing her daughter's head. "And for every woman who's sitting in a car right now, unable to go inside. For every woman Googling, 'Am I being abused?' at 3 a.m. For every woman who thinks she's crazy because someone's telling her she is. For every woman who needs to hear, 'You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're not alone. And you deserve better.'" Catherine stirred in her arms, making soft baby sounds. "Mama," she said, her first word, right on schedule at 6 months. "Mama." Victoria's heart broke and rebuilt simultaneously. This tiny person saw her as safety, as home, as protection. She would spend the rest of her life earning that trust. 1 year after Derek's conviction, Victoria stood in front of a different mirror than the hospital bathroom where she'd collapsed. This mirror reflected a woman she barely recognized, not because of bruises this time, but because of transformation. The physical scars had faded, her ribs had healed. The fear in her eyes had been replaced with something harder, wiser, a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged tempered instead of destroyed. Catherine was toddling now, 11 months old and already showing signs of her mother's determination. She pulled herself up on furniture, fell, got back up, refused help when she wanted to do things herself, and looked at the world with curious, fearless eyes. "She's so much like you," Lillian observed one morning, watching Catherine determinedly stack blocks. "God, I hope not," Victoria said. "I hope she's smarter, braver, less willing to accept bullshit. You're all of those things now." Now, after almost dying, after years of therapy, after she gestured vaguely at her life. "I want her to know her worth from the beginning, not have to lose herself to find herself." That was the goal, the mission. Raising a daughter who never questioned her right to take up space, who never made herself small to accommodate someone else's ego. Who knew, bone deep, that love meant kindness, not control? The trial had been over for a year, but the work continued. Derek filed appeals. His lawyers argued procedural errors. His father gave interviews claiming his son was innocent. But the evidence was overwhelming. The conviction stood. And while Derek rotted in a cell upstate, Victoria was building an empire of safety. The foundation now operated in 12 cities. They'd helped over 3,000 women escape domestic violence, provided legal representation, temporary housing, job training, therapy, childcare. Everything a woman needed to leave and rebuild. Victoria visited the safe houses regularly, not as the billionaire benefactor, though she was that too, but as a fellow survivor. She sat in circles and shared her story, listened to others share theirs, and watched healing happen in real time. One afternoon at the Philadelphia safe house, a young woman approached her after a group session. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Emma. I texted you a year ago. You gave me a card outside a restaurant." Victoria remembered the waitress with the bruised wrist, the woman she'd seen herself in. "You're here," Victoria said with genuine joy. "I'm here. I left him. It took me 3 months after you gave me that card, but I left. And now I'm training to be a paralegal, going to help other women like us navigate the legal system." They hugged, two women at different points in the same journey. "You saved my life," Emma said. "You saved your own life," Victoria corrected. "I just held the door open. You walked through it." That was the truth Victoria was learning. She couldn't save everyone, but she could light the way for those ready to save themselves, could provide resources and support and visibility, could use her platform to amplify voices that had been silenced. It was enough. It had to be enough. That night, Victoria sat in the nursery with Catherine, reading bedtime stories. Catherine couldn't understand the words yet, but she loved the sound of her mother's voice. would point at pictures and babble her own commentary. Once upon a time, Victoria read, there was a princess who everyone thought needed saving, but it turned out she could save herself. She just needed to remember how. Catherine patted the book with chubby hands. Mama. That's right, baby. Mama. After Catherine fell asleep, Victoria did something she'd been putting off. She wrote a letter to Derek. Not because he deserved her words, not because she needed closure from him, but because she needed to articulate for herself everything she'd learned. Derek, you tried to make me nothing. You succeeded for a while, but here's what you didn't understand. Nothing is actually something. It's potential, possibility, the space between who you were and who you're becoming. You made me nothing, and from that nothing, I built everything. I built a foundation that's helped thousands of women. I built a relationship with my daughter based on trust, not fear. I rebuilt my relationship with my mother. I reclaimed my inheritance, not just the money, but the strength my father always knew I had. And you're in a cell. Your legacy is pain and manipulation and eventually being forgotten. My legacy is Catherine and the foundation. And every woman who leaves because she read my story and realized she wasn't alone. You wanted to destroy me. Instead, you revealed me, stripped away everything false until only truth remained. And the truth is that I was always strong enough. I just needed to believe it. So thank you in a twisted way for that, for pushing me so far down that the only direction left was up. I hope the next 20 years give you time to think about what you've done, to understand the harm you caused, to become something better than what you are. But honestly, I don't care either way. You're irrelevant to my life now. A footnote, a cautionary tale, and I'm finally free. Victoria, she read the letter twice, then burned it in the fireplace. Some truths didn't need to be sent. They just needed to be acknowledged. As the paper curled and blackened, Victoria felt the last threads of connection to Derek dissolve. He would always be part of her story. You couldn't erase 3 years of abuse and attempted murder. But he no longer defined her story. She was the author now. 2 weeks later, Victoria made an unexpected decision. She enrolled in law school. Are you insane? Benjamin asked, not unkindly. You're running a multi-billion-dollar company and a foundation. You have an 11-month-old daughter. Why add law school? Because I want to understand the system that almost failed me. Want to learn how to change it from the inside. Want to be able to represent survivors myself someday. It was ambitious, probably crazy. But Victoria had learned that the impossible was just the difficult with better planning. She started classes part-time, studied while Catherine napped, brought her daughter to the foundation offices where a small daycare had been set up for staff children, proved that motherhood and ambition weren't mutually exclusive. Catherine's first birthday party was small but meaningful, just family and close friends, no media, no spectacle, just people who'd supported Victoria through the worst and celebrated the best. As Catherine smashed her face into a cupcake, completely delighted by the mess, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Make a wish, Margaret told Catherine, who obviously couldn't understand but smiled anyway. Victoria made a wish for her. May you always know you're loved. May you always know you're safe. May you always know your own strength. Later, after guests had left and Catherine was in bed, Victoria found herself back in her father's study, the room where this second chapter had begun, where she'd read his journal and understood finally what he'd been trying to teach her. She pulled out a blank journal, one she'd bought but hadn't opened yet, and began to write. Not documentation of abuse this time, not evidence for potential legal proceedings, just thoughts, reflections, lessons learned. Dear Catherine, you're 1 year old today. You smashed cupcake in your hair, and it was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Pure joy, pure presence, pure life. Someday you'll be old enough to ask about your father, and I'll tell you the truth, age appropriately. That he was a bad man who hurt people, that I left to protect us both, that his absence from your life is a gift, not a punishment. But more importantly, I'll tell you this, you come from a line of strong women. Your great-grandmother built a company from nothing. Your grandmother maintained that empire through market crashes and misogyny. And your mother survived things that should have destroyed her. You carry that strength in your DNA. But strength doesn't mean you won't fall. It means you'll get back up. Strength doesn't mean you won't be afraid. It means you'll act despite fear. Strength doesn't mean you won't need help. It means you'll have the courage to ask for it. You are not your father's daughter. You are mine. You are your grandmother's. You are Catherine Morgan's, the woman you were named for, who didn't survive but whose memory lives on through you. You are a testament to survival, to resilience, to the power of choosing life over destruction. And whatever you choose to do with your life, whatever career, relationship, path you take, know that you're loved, unconditionally, completely, forever. Your mama was a warrior, and someday you'll be one too. But not because you have to be, because you choose to be. That's the difference. Say, love, Mama. Victoria closed the journal. In a few years, she'd give it to Catherine. By then, there would be hundreds of entries, thousands of words of wisdom and love and truth. But for now, it was just a beginning. The road ahead was long. Law school would take years. Catherine would grow up with questions. Derek would eventually be eligible for parole, and they'd have to fight that. The foundation needed constant funding and attention. Hayes Industries required leadership. But for the first time in 6 years, Victoria felt equal to the challenge. Not because she had billions of dollars, though that helped. Not because she had support, though that was essential. But because she'd finally learned what her father had tried to teach her all along. Power wasn't about money or control or making others small so you could feel big. Power was about choosing every day, every moment, choosing strength over fear, action over paralysis, truth over comfortable lies. It was about sitting in your car outside your house, recognizing that home has become dangerous, and choosing to leave. It was about Googling, "Am I being abused?" at 3 a.m. and believing the answer. It was about accepting help when pride said you should do it alone. It was about using your resources, whatever resources you had, to help others climb out of holes you'd fallen into. That was power, and Victoria Hayes Worthington had finally learned how to wield it. 3 years later, this law school graduation was held outdoors on a perfect May morning. Victoria sat with her class, 31 years old and a newly minted JD, while Catherine, now 4, sat with Margaret in the family section. "That's Mama," Catherine kept saying loudly, pointing. Margaret shushed her gently, but Victoria could hear the pride in both their voices. After the ceremony, Victoria found them in the crowd. Catherine ran into her arms, nearly knocking her over. "You did it, Mama. You graduated." "I did, and you know what that means?" "What?" "It means Mama can help people even more now, can go to court and protect women like the ones at the foundation." Catherine nodded seriously. At 4, she already understood that her mother did important work, that the foundation was about keeping people safe, that safety mattered more than almost anything. "Can we get ice cream now?" Catherine asked, because she was still 4 and ice cream was important too. "We can definitely get ice cream." As they walked across campus, Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "Congratulations, counselor. When you start practicing, I'm definitely hiring you for my divorce." Victoria laughed. Jennifer was getting married next month to a kind man who made her laugh and never once raised his voice. The wedding invitation was on Victoria's fridge, a reminder that happy endings existed, that healing was possible, that life continued after trauma. Another text, this one from Detective Brennan. "Heard you passed the bar exam on your first try. Not surprised. When you're ready to take cases, call me. I have about 50 women who need someone like you." And another from Amber. "Just closed on my 50th property this year. All profits going to the foundation, as promised. We did it, Victoria. We actually did it." They had done it. The coalition of survivors had become a force. Jennifer was a social worker specializing in trauma. Amber had her real estate empire. Rachel had started a self-defense school for women. Sarah was a financial advisor, helping women rebuild after economic abuse. They'd taken their pain and transformed it into purpose. That night, after Catherine was asleep, Victoria stood on the balcony of the Hayes estate looking out at the grounds. 3 years since the trial. 4 years since the worst night of her life. And somehow, impossibly, she'd built something beautiful from the wreckage. The foundation had helped over 10,000 women now. Hayes Industries was thriving under her leadership. Catherine was happy, healthy, and showing early signs of her mother's fierce determination. And Victoria herself was finally, truly whole. Not healed. Healing wasn't a destination. It was a journey, but whole. She thought about Derek sometimes. He was still in prison, had another 17 years before parole eligibility. His father had died last year, still maintaining his son's innocence. The media had moved on to other stories, and Derek Callahan had become what he deserved to be, forgotten. Victoria heard footsteps behind her. Margaret joined her on the balcony with 2 glasses of wine. To new beginnings, Margaret toasted. To survival, Victoria corrected. To both. They clinked glasses and stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the estate that had once felt like a prison and now felt like home. Do you ever regret it? Margaret asked after a while. Disappearing for those 5 years? Missing that time with me? The path that led you to Derek? Victoria considered the question seriously. I regret the abuse. I regret not leaving sooner. I regret that Catherine will grow up without a father because hers was a monster. But do I regret the journey? No, because it made me who I am, and I actually like who I am now. I love who you are, Margaret said. I always have, even when you couldn't see it yourself. They hugged, mother and daughter. 2 women who'd lost years together but found their way back. Inside, Catherine called out, "A bad dream, probably." Victoria went to her, gathered her daughter close, and sang the lullaby her own father used to sing. You are brave, you are strong, you are loved all day long. When the world feels too big and the night feels too dark, remember you carry strength in your heart. Catherine settled, thumb in mouth, eyes drifting closed again. Safe, protected, loved. This was victory, not the courtroom kind, though that mattered, not the financial kind, though that helped, but the quiet, everyday kind, the kind where a child sleeps peacefully because she knows she's safe, where a mother can provide that safety because she finally learned her own strength, where a family rebuilt from ashes stands stronger than before. Victoria returned to her room and pulled out her journal, the one she'd been keeping for Catherine. It was almost full now, pages and pages of wisdom and love and truth. She wrote one final entry. Dear Catherine, you're 4 now, old enough to understand more than I think you do, young enough that the hard parts of my story can wait a few more years. But there's something I want you to know now, something I'll keep telling you your whole life. You are not responsible for other people's choices. Your father chose violence. I chose survival. You don't carry either of those choices. You get to make your own. And when you make mistakes, and you will because you're human and humans are beautifully flawed, I want you to know that mistakes don't define you. How you respond to them does. I made mistakes. I ran from responsibility. I stayed too long in danger. I let fear make decisions for me, but then I chose differently. I fought back. I reclaimed my power. I built something meaningful from the pain. You can too, whatever challenges you face, whatever storms you weather. You have the strength to survive them. Not because you're my daughter, though you are, and I'm proud of that, but because you're you, Catherine Grace Hayes, named for a woman who deserved better and a virtue we all need more of. Be brave, be kind, be strong, be yourself. And remember, when home feels more dangerous than anywhere else, you've already stayed too long. I love you to the moon and back, to the stars and beyond, to infinity and always. Mama, she closed the journal and placed it in the safe where it lived. Someday Catherine would read it, would understand the full story, would know that her mother was flawed and scared and human, but that she fought anyway. That was the legacy Victoria chose. Not victimhood, not bitterness, but the hard-won wisdom that came from walking through fire and choosing to help others avoid the flames. As she climbed into bed, Victoria thought about a conversation she'd had with Grace recently. Do you consider yourself healed? Grace had asked. Victoria had thought about it. I consider myself healing. It's not past tense. It's present continuous. Every day I choose healing over hatred, growth over stagnation, purpose over pain. That's not a destination. It's a practice. That was the truth. Healing wasn't something you achieved and checked off a list. It was a daily choice. Some days were easy, others required Herculean effort. But each day, Victoria chose it. And that made all the difference. Victoria Hayes Worthington used her voice to help thousands of women escape danger. She transformed her pain into power, her survival into purpose. And you? You just spent 2 hours listening to her story. That matters more than you know. If this story moved you, if Victoria's journey resonated, I have a small favor to ask. Hit that like button. Not for me, but for the algorithm that might show this story to someone who needs to hear it. Someone sitting in their car right now, afraid to go inside. Someone Googling, am I being abused at 3 in the morning? Someone who thinks they're alone. Drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, your reactions, or if you're comfortable, your own story. This community is built on survivors supporting survivors. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Share this video. Send it to someone who loves true stories about resilience, or maybe someone who needs permission to leave. You never know whose life might change because you clicked that share button. And if you want more stories like this, stories about survival, justice, and women who refuse to stay broken, subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell. Because every week I bring you narratives about ordinary people who did extraordinary things when pushed to their limits. Victoria's Foundation helped over 10,000 women in the story. This channel, it's helped survivors find resources, validation, and hope. You're part of that just by being here. One last thing, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, help exists. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. That's 1-800-799-SAFE. Available 24/7. Confidential. Free. You deserve better. You always deserve better. Thank you for listening to Victoria's story. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, when home feels more dangerous than anywhere else, you've already stayed too long. I'll see you next week with another story of survival. Until then, stay strong, stay safe, and know that you're not alone.